This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by composer George Shaw, whose work includes Abominable and The Invisible City, Little Sorcerer, and Riot Games 2023 Lunar Revel, just to name a few things. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I guess my first question for you, I went through your bio, and I need to know, what is your strategy to get EGOT?
I don't actually have a strategy other
Okay.
than just create great music
Yeah.
and we get noticed by filmmakers and work on great projects, and eventually awards will come, but I
Yeah.
really don't care about those.
Is there a composer that has gotten EGOT? Like, I'm running through my head of people who got it, and I can't think of.
I'd say most of the people who have EGOTs are either composers
Okay.
or actors who also sing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a pretty small group of people who have specific skills, and composing is actually one of the best ways to get it.
Yeah. So I guess no editors are going to get it.
But the line in my bio about the
Yeah.
EGOT is kind of a joke.
Yeah. No, I just thought it'd be funny to start off with that. Got to start high.
Exactly. Well,
uh,
mine's dream high in life.
yeah. So I guess my first question for you is, when you get like a project, whether it's something like a video game or a script, um, for a TV show or a movie, how do you approach figuring out what the sound is going to be for that? And like, I know that like it could be musical instruments that have to have a particular sound, or like a particular feel for the characters, or what do you look for in your scripts?
That is sort of it sort of differs for each project, and it's I don't even know where it comes from. A lot of it's just inspiration, right? Something that could trigger an idea for. I mean, sometimes it's a little obvious. I mean, the filmmaker has temp music, and it's just like, well, this is the tone we want, so that's what I'm going to do. And sometimes it's like really genre based, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, dramas are much more grounded compared to sci-fi or fantasy. So, sci-fi fantasy, I get to be a little more creative about creating a world of sound. So that to me is really exciting.
I've been a camera person for 30 years, and I fell in love with cinema. I heard there was free film school in France, and I wanted to get into the French film school. I really didn't know anything at the time, but I knew at least how to take pictures. So I said, I'll try for the image department. And then when I miraculously got into the French film school, I fell in love with working with the camera. You're following what's going to be in the movie. So that immediacy that the camera allows is what I loved from the beginning. I'm Kirsten Johnson, and this is my course about documentary cinematography.
Now, like, how do you, because a lot of editors will be like, okay, I'm going to choose this famous piece of music, stick it in, there we go, I've got my cut. But like, how do you make sure that you can still get your own sort of creative influence on it without just recreating what the editor's done with a few tweaks, right? Because you want to make sure that you're adding to the story and everything, and not just replicating another composer's work.
Right. So temp music is very useful in the first time that I watch a project, because without music, it can also often be very boring to
Mm-hmm.
watch an entire movie with no music. So it helps with the pacing a lot. Um, Beyond that, I'll listen to a filmmaker and see if they like the temp music or if they don't like it. And but even if they do like it, I tend to figure out what is the gist of it that they like. So if it's the tempo, if it's just the general mood, and usually it does kind of help you understand what that general vibe is. But then I shut off the temp music. I don't really listen to it much again unless I need to kind of reference something. But other than that, I actually forget what the temp music is because then I'm busy writing my own themes and working on the scenes away from the temp music. So it's actually easy for me to forget kind of what it was, but it kind of maybe inspired me a little bit in the beginning as far as general tone. So yeah, once I'm off and running, I'm just like mesmerized by my own ideas and themes, and I just kind of go off of that.
So when you're like when you're tackling, let's say, like an animation, like I think about your work with Abominable and the Invisible City or Little Sorcerer, like when I started, I was really lucky because I got to work on some animations for kids, and that was like a blast to like work on kids shows. But the other thing I noticed is like the sound design in particular was very minimalistic in kids shows. So when you're approaching like an animation for a kids show, do you find for the music it's minimalistic, or do you find that it's like more exuberant for like little kids? Like what do you find with animations?
That's interesting that you mentioned that the sound is minimal because the music is definitely not, and perhaps that's partly why there's a lot of kids animation has pretty much wall to wall music, there and if you actually even go back and look at the old school, Looney Tunes and the Mickey Mouse kind of stuff, it was very heavily scored. I mean, every time a character tiptoed, you'd hear a note for each tiptoe instead of sound effects. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
a way it was the music actually took the place of sound effects. If someone like fell, you'd hear like a xylophone bliss falling. So
Well,
that's kind of where like a lot of animation traditions came from. It's not quite as heavily scored in that way, or that sort of very cartoony way. It's actually called Mickey Mousing is the actual term.
yeah.
And but there's still a lot of music because like you said, there's not a lot of sound. There is dialogue, but it's also a very visual medium. So the
Mhm.
music really has to help carry those visuals.
Now, I have to say, so like you brought up Looney Tunes, and I know that one of my closest friends will always say that everything he knows about classical music he learned from Looney Tunes. So, do you feel a pressure to make sure that you're like making this music because kids are going to be looking back and being like, yeah, that piece like really got me or really moved me, or like that's their introduction, I guess, to like to a type of music, whether it's because it might not be classical for these shows.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say it's pressure, but it's what excites me about writing for animation is, I mean, I love a lot of the cartoons I grew up with and a lot of the music, and it's exciting to know that someday I'll meet people like grown adults who will be like, oh, I grew up on that and I loved it. So it's really exciting to know that it can have that effect, and that's one of the things I love about composing.
Was there an animation when you were a kid that you just loved the music from? It sticks with you?
Oh wow. I mean, so many things like DuckTales, especially
That was great.
that was awesome. Ninja Turtles,
Yeah.
Dark
X-Men.
Duck, and Ghostbusters. I grew up
Yeah.
with all of those Saturday morning cartoons in the 80s and 90s, and maybe that's actually why I'm very driven to write melodically and why I
Mhm.
love working in animation.
Well, it's funny because, like I said, it gets in kids' heads because I have a 6-year-old and she walks around, like I showed her the new DuckTales, and she walks around and that song is just stuck in her head, the opening song and like the little bits in the show, and she'll walk around singing it like it's looped in her head somehow. So like you said, it's going to be something that 30 years from now kids are going to be referencing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now when you are recording, because like I've talked to different composers, and some, when they create the music, it'll be using like synthesizers and sort of doing it just on their computer, whereas others will bring in their instruments and try to create the sound more I don't want to say analog because they're still recording in Pro Tools, but I mean like using actual instruments as opposed to a synth. How do you like to approach it? Do you like to sort of work it out on the synthesizer and then move to instruments, or do you like to stay just in one lane, I guess?
Particularly with the process of working with, the showrunners and filmmakers these days, everything that a composer typically does has to be mocked up prior to recording for the most part, unless the composer is recording themselves as they're generating ideas, which I do a little bit. But yeah, primarily you have to do the mock-up, send it over, get notes back, do revisions, and there's a little bit of a back and forth. So that, I mean, if you record something and then you have to change it, then you've got to re-record it, and it takes more time, right? So yeah, pretty much we have to get things approved first, and then record. In the case of Abominable and the Invisible City, there was no real recording budget other than a solo violin player. I was able to record a few other solo instruments here and there, but for the most part, the orchestral and even a lot of the Chinese instruments on that score were done on the computer. Of course, the advantage is I actually play a bunch of instruments, so I did actually record quite a few things here and there, even though I didn't have the budget to hire other people to do it. So I did it a lot myself. I played clarinet, some saxophone, bass clarinet, some Chinese wind instruments, a little bit of percussion and Chinese drumming. And so that actually really breathed a lot of life into the music.
So what is your go-to instrument that you're like, not like the one that you want to work with all the time, but the one that you're like, okay, it's my relax time, I just want to jam or I just want to hang out?
Yeah, I guess that would be piano, because then you can play by yourself and play chords and melody.
Yeah. Did you learn first on the piano and then out? Because I feel like that seems to be everyone's introduction, is like, we were going to force you to learn the piano at age 4. And
my parents tried at about 6.
Oh yeah.
I was actually intimidated by all those keys. I didn't understand that there's really only 12 and then they repeat over and over.
Yeah.
So I kind of was scared of doing it, and it wasn't till I was about 10 that I actually decided on my own that I wanted to learn. So I started a little bit late for most kids who get forced into the piano, but fortunately I wanted to do it, and I just fell in love with it on my own.
I wonder if you could describe for me like the moment when you realized you wanted to, like, was there a piece of music or a show or something that made you realize that you wanted to get in and become a composer?
So I very much grew up loving, like, my first few soundtracks were Back to the Future and Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, a lot of those, Aladdin as well, like the Alan Menken Disney movies. So that's kind of what got me interested in film music to begin with. But what really got me sort of interested in composing was I was in middle school band, I was playing clarinet. Wanted to play clarinet because I heard them play Beauty and the Beast. The clarinets had a lot of melody, so I was like, I want to play that. But then we played Jurassic Park the following year, and then the year after that we played Schindler's List. And I noticed that they were both composed by John Williams, and went out and bought a John Williams Boston Pop CD that had, E.T. and Star Wars on it, and a bunch of other film music cues. And that's kind of where the love of film music really started for me. And I was starting to write my own tunes. And before I knew it, I was like, well, I got to be a film composer.
We've sort of touched on it, that like the music can make you feel a particular way. So like when you're working on it, is that sort of, something that you sort of take into account when you're designing it? Like, I need the audience to feel, it could be something as simple as like these emotions, like, happy, sad, or it could be, we're entering into, a colder scene where they're outside in the freezing and we need to make them feel colder. Do you like take that into account and sort of build your sound for that?
Absolutely. A lot of what film music does is make the audience feel what isn't being said, or perhaps there's elements that you could see a scene in a field in the daylight, and you would think, oh, it's happy springtime music, right? But your character, your story could be taking you somewhere much darker, and so the music can actually play against what you see and make you feel something different to what we're seeing. So music is that sort of elusive, difficult to pin down, but it's helps bring whatever emotions that the filmmaker wants to bring out in the audience. So it's a useful tool for that. A lot of it is figuring out whose point of view, as a composer, whose point of view am I playing? Is it this character or that character, or is it something happening off screen? In the example of shark, Jaws, the shark theme is I mean, we never see the shark, but the music plays the menace of the approaching shark. So it can do all those things.
Well, and I love, if you think about Jaws, like how simple the score is, right? Just that one sort of note playing.
Notes, yeah.
Have you, like, because it'd be interested to know is, like, if you want to, like, have you felt in the past that, like, we could do this really simply with a couple of small instruments or one instrument even, and had directors sort of be like, no, I want like more of an orchestra sound or something like that, and had to, like, I don't want to say fight, but like negotiate and try show them that it would work in a different way?
It's interesting you say that, because I sort of came out of doing a lot of low budget indie films.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I always wanted to be like John Williams and score these big blockbusters. So I actually tended to go a little more orchestral, a little bit bigger. And so sometimes filmmakers would actually say the opposite of too much. So
bring it back. Yeah.
But then I've been working in animation for the last 3 years, and it's the opposite. It's like, oh, just give us more. We want that big sound. So, it really varies from project to project. And yeah, there are some stories and scenes that when I see them, I'm like, well, it does not need an orchestra. It needs something more subtle or something more interesting and unique. And, that's part of the creative process of figuring out with, obviously in collaboration with the filmmaker.
Now, I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Wow, that's a hard one.
It could be cartoon from the 80s and 90s too, because when you started listing the cartoons, I was like, I watched all those cartoons. Those are great.
I don't feel guilty about those. I'm actually proud of just of being a geek and loving all the wonderful content we've had growing up. I will say that I am such a big Star Wars fan that I know a lot of the newer things, especially the newer trilogy, gets a lot of crap. I loved what Rian Johnson did with Episode 8.
Yeah.
So with Force Awakens, I felt a little bit like it's too much like
New Hope.
New Hope. It didn't do anything new, and it felt like I wanted to see. I mean, it was great and looked cool and everything, but with Episode 8, I just loved that it was different. It was funny. It opened up the world to new possibilities, and obviously they maybe didn't all come to a satisfying conclusion, but I actually really love that movie.
Wow.
Also, the music is just brilliant because John Williams did it. So
yeah. Now, I also do have to ask: did you ever watch Eek the Cat?
No, I didn't.
Okay. I was wondering if if that made it onto your Saturday morning cartoons.
Unfortunately, my parents only let me watch, or they never like paid for cable.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with Nickelodeon and all those other cable kind of things, so I just had basic network like Fox Kids and all that stuff.
Well, it was on Fox Kids. I didn't have cable either. Same parent type of parents. It was like, we're not paying for that. But thank you so much for letting me interview today.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Well, that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com or, of course, on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.